You're fired, thief!
The CEO shouted, accusing me of stealing clients. The FBI walked in. Actually, the agent interrupted, flashing a badge. She is not a thief. She is our whistleblower, and you have the right to remain silent. The CEO's knees hit the floor. That was how it ended. It was loud, public, and deeply satisfying. But the beginning was much quieter. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a corporate office right before it implodes. It is not the silence of concentration. It is the silence of predators holding their breath. I knew the exact moment Haven Bridge Consulting went from being a fortress of strategy to a house of cards, held together by hair gel and nepotism. It was not a bang. It was the squeak of a $2,000 Herman Miller chair. I have spent 20 years in this game. I am a senior client strategist. That means I am the one who tells Fortune 500 CEOs that their baby is ugly. But for a $5 million retainer, I can put lipstick on it. I do not smoke. I do not drink before 6 in the evening. And I value loyalty like it is a precious metal in a market crash. But when the board announced the restructuring, I felt the shift in the air pressure. It smelled like expensive cologne and impending litigation. The new CEO, Douglas Crane, walked in like he was auditioning for the role of guy who embezzles the pension fund in a straight-to-streaming movie. He was 42, had teeth so white they violated safety regulations, and spoke exclusively in buzzwords. Synergy, paradigm shift, disruptive innovation. The guy was a walking, talking presentation that nobody signed up for. He did not care about our legacy clients. He cared about optics. In my line of work, optics is usually code for lying with a better font. I tried to give him a chance, I really did. I am a professional. I have worked with sociopaths, narcissists, and guys who think reply all is a power move. I can handle a little ego. But Douglas was different. He brought in a transition team, a pack of 20-something MBA graduates in slim-fit suits who looked like they would sell their own grandmothers for a verified check mark on social media. They started prowling the hallways, taking notes on tablets, asking questions that did not make sense. Why do we archive physical contracts? Can we streamline the billing through the Cayman subsidiary? Red flags started popping up faster than weeds in a neglected garden. I walked into the break room on a Tuesday, which used to be stocked with actual food, not just wellness shots that taste like dirt and sad kale, and overheard 2 of Crane's minions talking. One was aggressively stirring sweetener into his coffee. He said that Crane needed the third quarter numbers to look robust for the investors. The other laughed and asked if he meant robust or creative. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said they were maximizing the realized potential of future earnings. I stirred my black coffee and stared at the wall. Maximizing realized potential of future earnings. In English, that means booking money we do not have yet. It is the kind of accounting magic that gets people fitted for orange jumpsuits. But I kept my mouth shut. You do not survive 2 decades in Manhattan consulting by barking at every shadow. You wait, you watch, you collect receipts. The vibe in the office shifted from quiet confidence to paranoid silence. People stopped making eye contact in the elevators. Closed-door meetings became the norm. My access to certain shared drives started glitching. IT issues, they said. Right, and I am the Queen of England. I started noticing that my legacy clients, companies I have nurtured for 10 years, manufacturing giants from the Midwest who value a handshake over a video call, were being reassigned to junior partners. When I asked Douglas about it, he gave me that smile. The one that does not reach his dead shark eyes. He told me I was too valuable to be bogged down in the day-to-day. He said they were pivoting. He said they needed fresh energy on the legacy accounts to disrupt their stagnation. Disrupt their stagnation. I repeated the words in my head. Those accounts were the bedrock of this firm. They paid the light bill. They did not want disruption. They wanted consistency. But Douglas told me consistency was the enemy of growth. He tapped a pen against his mahogany desk and told me to get with the program. I left his office with a cold knot in my stomach. It was not just the disrespect. I can handle being sidelined. It was the sloppiness. He was moving pieces around the board without knowing what they did. Then came the invoice. I was reviewing the budget for a project I was technically still supervising. It was a massive logistics overhaul for a shipping conglomerate. I saw a line item for $250,000 paid to a vendor named Obsidian Solutions. I know every vendor in the city. I know the caterers, the printers, the data analysts, the forensic accountants. I had never heard of Obsidian Solutions. I pulled the digital file. The service description was vague. Strategic consultant retainer. I dug deeper. The address for Obsidian Solutions was a post office box in Delaware. The point of contact was a generic email address, and the approval signature. It was a digital stamp. Specifically, it was the digital stamp of the CFO, a man named Marcus, who has been with the firm for 30 years and usually audits lunch receipts if they go over $20. I walked down to Marcus's office. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had not slept in a month. When I asked him about Obsidian, he flinched. He actually flinched. He stammered that it was a special project for Douglas and told me to leave it alone. He said it was above our pay grade. I leaned over his desk. I told him nothing was above my pay grade when it came to my client's budget. He looked at the door, then whispered that it was a pass-through. That was all he could say. He begged me to drop it for my own sake. I walked back to my office, the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets in my ears. A pass-through. That meant a shell company. A fake vendor billing $250,000 for nothing. And the CFO was terrified. Most people would have polished up their resume right then. Most people would have called a headhunter. But I am not most people. I do not run from a mess. I clean it up. I opened a fresh notebook. Paper, not digital, because paper cannot be hacked. I wrote down 2 words, Obsidian Solutions. 3 weeks later, the internal mailbot dropped a notification in my inbox. Document processed. 3rd quarter compliance assurance. Omega Systems. Omega Systems was one of the accounts Douglas had stripped from me. I had not touched an Omega file in 2 months. Why was I getting a processing notification? I clicked the link. The document opened. It was a federal compliance certification stating that Omega Systems had met all environmental and labor standards for their new government contract. It was a heavy document. If you sign this and it is false, you do not just get fired. You get fined by the EPA and investigated by the Department of Justice. I scrolled to the bottom. There, in crisp digital blue ink, was my signature, Marion V. Sterling, dated yesterday. I froze. I stared at the screen until the pixels started to blur. I did not sign that. I was not even in the building yesterday at the time listed. I was at a dental appointment. I have the receipt. I have the numb jaw to prove it. Someone had accessed my digital signature file, which is supposed to be encrypted and password protected with 2-factor authentication, and slapped it onto a document that smelled radioactive. I did not scream. I did not throw my stapler. I went into crisis mode. This is what I do. I assess the damage. I identify the breach. I neutralize the threat. I printed the document. Then I walked straight to HR. Our HR director, Linda, was a woman who treated conflict avoidance as an Olympic sport. She had a smile that looked like it was painted on, and an office filled with inspirational posters about teamwork and resilience. I closed the door and locked it. I told her we had a problem. I laid the document on her desk and told her I did not sign it. Linda picked it up, adjusting her glasses. She looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. She said, "Well, it is your signature, Marion. The system logs show you accessed the file at 2 in the afternoon. I told her I was at the dentist at 2 in the afternoon. My voice was icy. I told her to check my calendar. Check the building security logs. I did not swipe in. Linda sighed. It was the kind of sigh you give a toddler who will not eat their peas. She asked if I was sure I did not just forget. She said we had all been under a lot of stress with the transition. Then she dropped the bomb. She said Douglas mentioned I had been seeming a little scattered lately. The word hit me like a slap. Scattered, that was the narrative. They were seeding it. I am not scattered. I am the most organized person in the zip code. This was forgery. This was fraud. I demanded a forensic audit of my login credentials. Linda's smile faltered just for a second. A flash of fear, or was it annoyance? She told me not to use words like fraud. She said it was very aggressive. She suggested maybe it was a system glitch, and she would have IT look into it. She said she would make a note in my file, but she dismissed me with a wave of her hand. She said making a fuss about a glitch did not look like team player behavior. I walked out of HR knowing 2 things. 1, Linda was useless or complicit. 2, they were setting me up to take the fall. If that Omega contract went south, it was my name on the line. Douglas was not just greedy, he was insulating himself with my reputation. I sat in my ergonomic chair and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. The sun was setting, turning the glass buildings into pillars of fire. The comfortable order was gone. The war had begun. And Douglas Crane had no idea he just declared it on the wrong woman. There is a specific kind of nausea that hits you when you see your own name signed to a lie. It is not like the movies where the music swells and the camera zooms in. It is quiet. It is a drop in body temperature. It is the realization that your identity, your professional soul, has been hijacked. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in that nausea. In the office, I played the part of the obedient soldier. I smiled at the frat boys in their slim-fit suits. I nodded during Douglas's manic town hall meetings where he spoke about disruption until his face turned red. I was biding my time, but the isolation ramped up immediately. It was subtle at first. Conversation stopped when I entered the break room. I would walk in, and 3 junior analysts would suddenly become very interested in the coffee machine. Then the meeting invites stopped coming. The Monday morning strategy huddle disappeared from my calendar. When I asked the administrative assistant, she would not meet my eyes. She mumbled that Douglas wanted to keep the group small for efficiency. She said I was focusing on internal projects. Internal projects. That is corporate code for dead man walking. I sat in my glass-walled office feeling like a specimen in a jar. They were watching me. I could feel it. I spent my days looking busy. I opened old files. I rearranged my desktop icons. I reviewed the employee handbook just to have something on my screen. Then came the phone call. It was on my personal cell phone from an unlisted number. I let it ring twice before answering. Is this Marion Sterling? The voice was male, rough, sounding like 40 years of cigarettes and construction sites. I asked who was calling. He said he was calling from Redfield Logistics. He asked if I remembered them from back in 2018. Redfield. Good people. Honest, I told him I remembered. He lowered his voice. He said he should not be calling, but someone reached out to them yesterday. He said the person claimed to be my associate. They said I was transitioning out of the firm and wanted to move the Redfield account to a new holding company for tax efficiency. My blood ran cold. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I told him I never authorized that. He said he figured as much. He said the guy sounded slick. Too slick. He sent over some paperwork on Haven Bridge letterhead, but the routing numbers were weird. He threw it in the trash, but he thought I should know. He said they were using my name, Marion. They were shopping my reputation to move money. I thanked him and hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. Pure, unadulterated, white-hot rage. They were not just forging signatures. They were impersonating me. They were using the trust I built over 20 years to funnel clients into their shell companies. I looked at the framed photo of my father on my desk. He was a union representative in Detroit. He taught me that you do not cross a picket line, and you do not let bullies win. Douglas Crane thought he was playing 4-dimensional chess. He thought he could gaslight me into quitting or frame me for his crimes. He forgot one thing. I know where the bodies are buried, because I am the one who designed the cemetery. I left at 5 in the evening sharp. I took a different route home. I checked for tails. I switched subway cars at the last second. I felt ridiculous, like I was role-playing a spy novel, but the prickling sensation on the back of my neck would not go away. When I got to my apartment on the Upper West Side, the air felt wrong. I live alone. I know exactly how I leave things. I am a creature of habit. I leave my blinds angled at 45 degrees to catch the morning light. I leave my throw pillows in a specific diamond pattern on the sofa. The door was locked. The deadbolt was engaged. But when I pushed it open, the throw pillows were square. My breath hitched. I stood in the doorway, my keys still in my hand. I walked in slowly. Nothing looked stolen. My laptop was on the coffee table. My jewelry box on the dresser was closed. But my bookshelf was different. The books were pushed back an inch. They were perfectly aligned with the edge of the shelf when I left. Now they were recessed. I went to the kitchen. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened the spice cabinet. I keep my spices in alphabetical order. Basil, cayenne, cinnamon, cumin. It is not just about organization. It is about control. It is about knowing that in a chaotic world, the cumin is exactly where it is supposed to be. The jars were wrong. The sriracha was next to the cinnamon. The turmeric was behind the salt. Someone had been here. They had not taken anything. They had just touched things. They had moved things. It was a message. We can get in. You are not safe. We can touch your life, and you cannot stop us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vomit. The violation was so intimate, so creepy. It was gaslighting on a physical level. If I called the police, what would I say? Officer? Someone broke in and rearranged my oregano. They would think I was crazy. That was the point. They wanted me to feel unstable. I checked the vents. I checked the smoke detectors for listening devices. I found nothing. They were professionals. I stood in the center of my kitchen, hugging myself to stop the shivering. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to run. But fear, when compressed tightly enough, turns into something else. It turns into diamonds. Or in my case, it turns into ice. I remembered the go bag. Years ago, my father told me to always keep a burn file. If you work with money, Marion, keep a copy of the truth where nobody can find it. I went to the freezer. I pushed aside the frozen dinners and the ice cream. In the back, buried under a bag of store-brand mixed vegetables, was a bag of frozen peas. It was wrapped in 3 layers of plastic zipper bags and duct tape. I took it out. My fingers were numb from the cold. I cut through the tape with kitchen shears. Inside the bag of peas, nestled among the frozen green spheres, was a USB drive. It was not the new stuff, it was the historical data. The baselines. The proof of what the firm used to be. I had backed it up 6 months ago, just on a hunch, right before Douglas took over. I thought the drive in my hands. I plugged it into my personal laptop. I physically removed the wireless internet card before I turned it on. This machine was air-gapped. It did not exist to the outside world. The data loaded. I looked at it with fresh eyes. I compared the historical baselines to the numbers I had memorized from the current reports. And then I saw it. The glitch in the Peterson account. The one Douglas claimed was a recent error. It was not a glitch. It started 6 months ago. The money had started drifting out of the account 4 weeks before Douglas was even officially CEO. He was cooking the books during the transition. He was siphoning money while shaking hands and talking about synergy. This drive proved premeditation. They broke into my house to find dirt on me, and they missed the evidence that would bury them, because they were looking for safes and hard drives, not frozen vegetables. I poured a glass of wine. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to drink. The terror was still there, lurking in the corners of the room where the shadows were too long, but the plan was forming. They thought they had me isolated. They thought they had me scared. They thought I was just a lonely woman with OCD who organized her spices. Okay, Douglas, I whispered to the empty, violated apartment. You want to come into my house? Let us see how you like it when I burn yours down. I could not fight this from the inside anymore. The internal channels were compromised. HR was compromised. If I stayed and fought by the book, I would lose. They owned the referees. I needed a bigger gun. I pulled out the burner phone I had bought with cash 2 days ago. I dialed a number I had memorized from a late-night research session on an encrypted browser. It was the number for the Department of Justice, White-Collar Crimes Division. A voice answered. It was an automated menu. I waited for the operator. Federal Bureau of Investigation, New York Field Office. I took a breath that tasted like car exhaust and freedom. I want to report a massive fraud involving federal contracting and shell companies, I said. I have names. I have dates. And I am on the inside. Who is this? The voice asked. Call me Deep Client, I said. I felt ridiculous, but cautious. Mom, I need a name. My name is Marion Sterling, I said, and I work for Haven Bridge Consulting. You are going to want to record this. Spy movies make espionage look sexy. It is all martinis and tuxedos and high-tech gadgets that fit in a fountain pen. Real-life espionage is sweat stains, dry mouth, and pretending to care about a spreadsheet while you covertly copy a hard drive. It is the terrifying thought that the information technology guy named Kevin is actually a counter-intelligence genius who is watching your keystrokes. My handler was a special agent named Miller. We did not meet in a parking garage. We met at a hipster coffee shop 4 blocks from my office, the kind of place that charges $7 for bean water and plays obscure indie folk music. Miller did not look like a federal agent. He looked like a barista. He wore a flannel shirt, had a beard that required maintenance, and sat behind a laptop covered in stickers for bands I had never heard of. But his eyes were different. They did not drift. They scanned the room like a radar dish, cataloging every face, every exit, and every movement. I sat down opposite him. I was wearing my charcoal power suit. He was wearing faded denim. We looked like a blind date that was going horribly wrong. "Keep your voice down," he said, staring at his lat. "You look tense." "I am stealing financial records from a man who probably has a hitman on retainer," I hissed, sipping my tea. "Sorry if I am not zen. Did you get the batch files?" "I got them. They are on the encrypted drive." I slid a generic-looking USB stick across the table under a napkin. It contained the initial scrape I had done before they locked me out of the main servers, combined with the historical data from the frozen peas drive. "It is worse than I thought, Miller," I said. "Obsidian is not the only one. There are 12 of them. 12 shell companies." Miller did not blink. He just palmed the drive and made it disappear into his pocket. "Talk to me." "They are using a layering technique," I explained, slipping into my professional mode. It calmed me to talk about the mechanics. It turned the crime into a logic puzzle. Haven Bridge gets the legitimate government contract, say for infrastructure consulting. They subcontract 40% of the work to a specialized vendor. That vendor is a shell. That shell subcontracts to another shell. By the time the money hits the third layer, it vanishes into offshore accounts in the Caymans and Cyprus. "And the actual work?" Miller asked. "It is never done," I said. "They are billing the Department of Defense for strategic analysis that consists of copied Wikipedia articles. It is fraud on an industrial scale." Miller's jaw tightened. "How much?" "Conservative estimate is $40 million in the last 6 months. He let out a low whistle. "Okay, this is good. The data is solid. But we need the link to Crane. We need to prove he is directing it, not just signing off blindly." "He does not sign anything," I said. "He uses digital stamps. He uses Marcus. He uses me. That is his defense. He will claim ignorance. He will say he was missiled by rogue employees." "We need a direct communication," Miller said. "An email, a recording, something where he explicitly orders the fraud. We need the smoking gun, Marion." "He is careful," I said. "He speaks in code. He talks about maximizing potential and optimizing flows. He never says steal or launder." "You need to make him break code," Miller said, finally looking me in the eye. His gaze was intense. "You need to push him." "Make him angry." "Angry?" I asked. "Angry men make mistakes," Miller said. "Arrogant men get sloppy when they feel challenged. You need to stop hiding in your office. Go poke the bear." "Make him say the quiet part out loud." He handed me a small, flat device. It looked like a credit card. "What is this?" I asked. "Capture software," he said. "You need to plug this into a terminal on the executive network, not your computer, his network. It will run a background script that logs network traffic coming from the executive suite. It is invisible to standard virus scanners, but you have to physically install it. You want me to break into the executive suite?" I whispered. "I am on probation. If I am caught near Douglas's office, they will fire me. If you do not get that evidence, they are going to frame you anyway," Miller said. "You are already dead to them, Marion. You might as well be a ghost." I took the card. It felt heavy, despite weighing less than an ounce. Walking back to the office was like walking into a lion's den wearing a steak vest. Every time I swiped my badge at the turnstile, I expected the light to turn red. I expected security to tackle me, but the light turned green. I went back to my desk. My administrative probation meant I had no work to do, but I had to be physically present. It was psychological torture. I sat in my glass box. I watched the office hum around me. I needed an opening. I needed a reason to be near the executive row. At 2 in the afternoon, the opening appeared. The executive assistant, a terrified young woman named Chloe, left her desk to get coffee. Douglas's door was closed, but the server closet for the executive wing was just down the hall. It was ostensibly locked, but I knew the code. I wrote the code. I stood up. I grabbed a stack of empty files to look like I had a purpose. I walked down the hallway. My heart was thumping so hard I thought my blouse was moving. I walked past the break room. I walked past Chloe's empty desk. I reached the server closet. I punched in the code. 1984. A little Orwellian joke I had set up years ago. The light turned green. I slipped inside. It was cool and smelled of ozone. I found the main switch for the executive subnet. I plugged Miller's card into the rear port. A tiny red light blinked once, then vanished. It was done. The tap was in. I stepped back out into the hallway. Douglas was standing there. He was 10 feet away, holding a tablet. He stopped. He looked at me. He did not smile. He just stared like a biologist observing a dying insect. I froze. I clutched the empty files to my chest. "Douglas," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Marion," he said. His voice was smooth, devoid of any humanity. "Wandering the halls?" "Just looking for some old archives," I lied. "We digitized everything, Marion. You know that." He took a step closer. I could smell his cologne. It was overpowering. "You look tired," he said. "Maybe you should go home, rest up. You have a big future behind you." He smirked. A tiny, imperceptible curl of the lip. He thought he was being clever. He thought he had already won. I stared back at him. I remembered Miller's words. "Make him angry." "I am fine, Douglas," I said. I was just admiring the efficiency of the new operation. It is amazing how much money you can save when you stop paying for ethics. His smile vanished. His eyes narrowed. "Careful, Marion," he whispered. I walked past him. I did not look back. I felt his eyes boring into my spine. I had poked the bear. Now I just had to hope I survived the mauling. Retaliation in the corporate world is rarely physical. It is architectural. It is about where you sit, how much light you get, and how far you are from the bathroom. On Thursday morning, I arrived at the office ready for war. I was wearing my armor, a silk blouse and a blazer sharp enough to cut glass. I swiped my badge, green light. I walked to the glass-walled office I had occupied for 6 years, the one with the view of the Hudson River, the one where I had signed deals worth $50 million. It was empty. My mahogany desk was gone. My ergonomic chair was gone. My framed diplomas, my dying orchid, my father's union pin, all gone. In the center of the room, sitting on a plush beige rug that I had never seen before, was a single, purple meditation cushion. A small fountain in the corner trickled water with an annoying, inconsistent rhythm. I stood there blinking. A young woman from facilities management walked by, avoiding my gaze. I stepped in front of her. "Where is my office?" I asked. She looked at her tablet. "Oh, Miss Sterling?" Douglas decided that the team needed a wellness zone, a place to decompress. He converted your office into a meditation space. A meditation space. He kicked me out of the office I earned over 2 decades so he could pretend to be mindful while robbing the taxpayers. "And where am I supposed to work?" I asked. She pointed down the hall. "We set up a temporary station for you near the supply closet, until the reorganization is complete." I walked down the hall. There, shoved into a corner next to the printer that always jams, was a gray folding table, the kind you see at church bake sales. Sitting behind it was a metal chair with rust on the legs. My computer tower was sitting on the floor, cables tangling like snakes. It was a public shaming. It was a pillory. They wanted me to sit there exposed, stripped of my status, so every junior analyst and intern could see that Marion Sterling was garbage. They wanted me to quit. They wanted me to run out crying so they could tell the board I was unstable. I sat in the rusted chair. It squeaked loud enough to be heard in Jersey. I powered up my computer. A pop-up window appeared immediately. "Access denied. Your credentials have been suspended pending the investigation." I was sitting at a folding table with a bricked computer in the middle of a hallway. I could feel the eyes on me, the whispers. I did not run. I did not cry. I reached into my bag and pulled out a paperback book, The Art of War. I opened it to page 1. I crossed my legs. I sat up straight, and I started reading. I turned the pages slowly. "Let them stare. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night," I read. "And when you move, fall like a thunderbolt." At 3 in the afternoon, Douglas stopped by my desk. He was holding a green juice. He looked down at me from his towering height, his face arranged in a mask of fake concern. "Comfortable, Marion?" he asked. "Cozy," I said, not looking up from the book. "Less pretension. I like it." He took a sip of his juice. "We lost the Kincaid account today," he said casually. "They cited a lack of strategic vision." "That was your account, wasn't it?" "I haven't spoken to Kincaid in 3 months, Douglas. You gave that account to Brad. If Brad lost it, that is on you." "Brad says you poisoned the well before you left," Douglas said. "He says you badmouthed the firm." "That is tortious interference, Marion. We could sue you for the lost revenue. Millions." I finally looked up. I met his eyes. "Do it," I said. "Discovery would be fascinating. I would love to see the emails Brad sent Kincaid. I bet the typos alone are grounds for a lawsuit." Douglas's eye twitched. That tiny spasm again. A crack in the porcelain. You are playing a dangerous game, he hissed, leaning down so only I could hear. You think you are smart, but you are just old. And you are in the way. He walked away. I watched him go. He was rattled. My pocket buzzed. I waited until he turned the corner. I pulled out the burner phone. It was linked to the capture card I had planted in the server room yesterday. One new notification. I opened the app. The background script had caught a large file transfer from Douglas's terminal to an external server. The file name was encrypted, but the metadata was visible. Subject project clean sweep. Attachment, termination list.pdf. I felt a cold sweat break out under my silk blouse. Clean sweep. Termination list. I was not just investigating a fraud ring. I was on a clock. They were planning a purge. And I knew with absolute certainty that termination did not just mean firing people. It meant erasing evidence. It meant wiping drives. It meant digital incineration. I checked the timestamp on the file transfer. It was scheduled for execution on Monday morning at 9. I had 3 days. If I did not get the physical proof, the recording, the undeniable link to Douglas before Monday, the entire case would vanish. He would fire the witnesses, wipe the servers, and claim it was just a restructuring. I looked at the folding table. I looked at the meditation room down the hall. They thought they had neutralized me. They thought I was trapped in the hallway. But they forgot that the hallway connects to everything. I put the phone away. I turned the page of my book. I needed to move. I needed to get Douglas in a room and make him confess. The email arrived 10 minutes later. It pinged on my phone, sent to my personal address since my work email was locked. Subject emergency board meeting. Time, Friday 10 in the morning. Attendance mandatory. I stared at the screen. This was it. This was the setup. They were not going to wait for me to quit. They were going to publicly execute me in front of the board to discredit me before the purge. I closed my book. I stood up. The metal chair scraped against the floor, a harsh, ugly sound. I packed my bag. I walked to the elevator. I did not look at the meditation room. I did not look at the frightened faces of the staff. I went home to prepare. I had a funeral to attend tomorrow. My own. I dressed for a funeral. Black pantsuit, sharp enough to cut glass. Silk blouse. Red lipstick applied like war paint. If they were going to kill my career, I was going to look damn good in the casket. The summons was for 10 in the morning. I arrived at 9:45. I walked past the reception desk where the logo was mounted in brushed steel. I walked past the open plan office where the junior analysts were already hunched over their screens, maximizing realized potential. I walked into the boardroom. The air conditioning was set to Arctic. The entire board was there. 12 men and 2 women who controlled billions of dollars and probably had not bought their own groceries in a decade. They sat around the massive oval table, sipping sparkling water and looking grave. Douglas sat at the head of the table. He did not look like the manic juice, drinking tech bro from the hallway yesterday. He looked somber. He looked like a father about to discipline a wayward child. The performance was Oscar-worthy. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Douglas said. His voice dropped an octave to simulate integrity. "We have a crisis, a cancer in this organization." He clicked a small remote. A slide appeared on the massive screen behind him. It was my face. It was a photo taken from my identification badge, blown up until it was grainy and unflattering. Next to it, in bold red letters, were the words "unauthorized data exfiltration and client poaching." "We have uncovered evidence," Douglas lied, looking at the table, "that Marion Sterling has been systematically stealing proprietary client data. She has been feeding our pricing strategies to competitors and attempting to lure our legacy clients to a solo practice she plans to launch." The board gasped. Actual gasps. These people were sheep in wolves' clothing. "This is a lie," I said. My voice was calm, projecting to the back of the room. I stood up. I placed my hands on the leather back of my chair. "This is a fabrication to cover up the fact that—" "Sit down!" Douglas roared. He slammed his hand on the table. "You have done enough damage, Marion." He clicked the remote again. A series of emails appeared on the screen. They were sent from my work account to a competitor's domain. The subject lines were incriminating. "Omega files attached. Pricing structure for Q3. We caught these in the server logs," Douglas said, his voice trembling with fake outrage. "We were able to intercept them before they caused fatal damage. But the intent is clear. She is selling us out. He looked at the chairman of the board, a man named Sterling. No relation, just a cruel irony. I recommend immediate termination for cause, forfeiture of all stock options, and immediate legal action, Douglas said. The chairman looked at me. His eyes were cold. He had known me for 15 years. He had been at my wedding. Now he looked at me like I was a stranger who had broken into his house. "Marion, do you have anything to say?" the chairman asked. I looked at Douglas. He was smirking. A tiny, imperceptible curl of the lip. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed me. And in that moment, I realized what I had to do. If I fought him now, if I screamed about the frozen peas and the shell companies, they would just circle the wagons. They would bury the evidence deeper. They would stall the investigation until the statutes of limitation ran out. I needed Douglas to feel safe. I needed him to think the kill shot had landed. I needed him to relax so he would make a mistake. I had to play the part. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble, just a little. I looked down at the carpet. "I gave my life to this firm," I whispered. My voice trembled. It was the best acting of my life. "And you betrayed it," Douglas said smoothly. "Security is outside. Please hand over your badge and phone." The chairman nodded slowly. The motion was carried. I was terminated. 2 security guards stepped into the room. I knew them. I had said good morning to them for 5 years. They looked ashamed. "I am sorry, Miss Sterling," one of them whispered. I took off my badge. I placed it on the mahogany table. It made a hollow clack. I took out the company phone from my purse and placed it next to the badge. "You are making a mistake," I said, looking at the board one last time. "He is lying to you. Get her out." Douglas snapped. I was escorted out. The walk of shame. We walked past the glass walls of the conference room. We walked past the open plan office. Everyone watched. The junior analysts, the frat boys, the administrative staff. The silence was heavy, suffocating. I held my head high, but I kept my shoulders slumped just enough to sell the defeat. They walked me to the lobby. They took my building pass. "You are banned from the premises," the head of security said. His face was stony. "If you return, you will be arrested for trespassing." I walked out the revolving doors into the humid New York air. The noise of the city hit me like a physical wave. Sirens, horns, the chatter of tourists. I stood on the sidewalk. I looked up at the glass tower. It looked different now. It was no longer my home. It was a crime scene. I was fired, disgraced, stripped of my equity. My career was over. My purse buzzed. I reached down to my inner thigh. Taped to my leg, hidden under the fabric of my pants, was the burner phone. I walked around the corner to a falafel stand. I pulled the phone free. One text message from Miller. "Did they do a type back? I am out." They took the bait. "I am officially a disgruntled ex-employee." A Miller replied instantly. "That's perfect. Because now, legally, you have no expectation of privacy regarding the company. And neither do they," I typed. "Is the warrant ready? The judge just signed it. But we need one more thing. The physical server backup. The one in the server room. The cloud data is good, but if they wipe the physical drives, we lose the metadata trail." I looked back at the building. I saw the security guards watching me through the glass. Can you get back in?" "Douglas thinks I am broken," I said to myself. "He thinks I am going home to cry. He thinks he took my keys. But he forgot that I was the one who authorized the security system upgrade 3 years ago. And I kept a master key, not digital, physical." I typed back to Miller. "The resurrection is scheduled for midnight." I turned and walked away. But I did not go home. I went to the coffee shop across the street. I sat by the window. I ordered a triple shot espresso. I watched the building. I watched the lights. I waited for the sun to go down. Douglas Crane was going to celebrate tonight. He was going to drink expensive scotch and laugh about the old woman he had destroyed. He was going to think he was untouchable. Let him enjoy it. It was going to be his last night of freedom. Midnight in a corporate high-rise is a ghost town. The air is recycled, the silence is pressurized, and the only light comes from the emergency exit signs, casting a blood-red glow on the carpet. It is a space designed for commerce, but at this hour, without the movement of people, it feels like a tomb. I stood at the loading dock entrance on the west side of the building. I was not wearing my heels anymore. I had changed into black sneakers. I was not the high-powered strategist Marion Sterling. I was a shadow. Douglas Crane's security team was obsessed with digital threats. They had firewalls, biometric scanners, and encryption keys that rotated every hour. But they had forgotten the most basic rule of security. If you do not change the physical locks, the digital locks do not matter. I pulled out my old master key. It was a heavy brass object, scratched and tarnished with age. I had reported it lost 3 years ago, but I had actually dropped it behind a filing cabinet. When I found it, I kept it. Call it paranoia. Call it foresight. I call it insurance. I slid the key into the cylinder on the service door. I held my breath. If they had changed the cores, the key would not turn, and I would be standing here like a fool. The mechanism groaned. The bolt retracted. The heavy steel door clicked open. I slipped inside. The loading dock smelled of diesel and wet cardboard. I moved quickly to the service elevator. I did not call it. The noise of the gears might alert the night watchman. Instead, I took the stairs. 40 flights. I climbed. My breath came in steady, rhythmic bursts. My legs burned. With every flight, I shed another layer of the fear that Douglas had tried to instill in me. He had fired me. He had humiliated me. He had taken my name and dragged it through the mud. But as I climbed, the shame evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I reached the 40th floor. The executive suite. I cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. The motion sensor lights flickered on, sensing my presence. I froze. I waited. Nothing happened. No alarms. Just the low hum of the ventilation system. I moved down the hall, sticking to the walls. My first target was the server room. It was located halfway between the elevator bank and the executive offices. I reached the door. I used the master key again. The lock clicked open. I slipped inside. The room was freezing. The air conditioning was cranked up to keep the machines from overheating. The noise was deafening, a constant, high-pitched whine of cooling fans. Rows of black server racks stood like monoliths, blinking with frantic blue and green lights. I found the main rack. I located the physical backup drive, a black box the size of a toaster. This was the holy grail. The cloud data was good, but the physical drive held the unscrubbed metadata. It held the timestamps of every deletion, every edit, every fraudulent transaction before it was washed. I pulled out the cloning tool Miller had given me. It was a small black box with a single cable. I plugged it into the service port of the drive. A small screen on the tool lit up. Cloning in progress. 0%. I watched the numbers tick up. 1%, 2%. It was agonizingly slow. Then I heard a noise. It came from the hallway. The jingle of keys, heavy footsteps. Security patrol. I looked at the screen. 10%. The footsteps were getting closer. I could hear a voice, a radio squawk. Check the temp in the server room, the voice said. The sensors are reading a variance. I looked around frantically. There was nowhere to go. The room was a dead end. I dropped to my knees. I crawled behind the main server rack. The space was tight, filled with tangled cables and dust bunnies. I curled myself into a ball, hugging the warm metal chassis of the server. The door opened. A beam of light swept across the room. It cut through the darkness, dancing over the blinking lights. I held my breath. I tried to make my heart stop beating. I was sure he could hear it over the fans. Thump, thump. The guard stepped inside. I could see his boots. Black, polished, thick rubber soles. He walked down the center aisle. He stopped 3 feet from where I was hiding. He shined his flashlight on the temperature gauge. "It is fine," he said into his radio. "Probably just a sensor glitch. It feels chilly enough to hang meat in here." He swept the light around the room one last time. The beam passed over the top of the rack I was hiding behind. If he took 1 step to the left, he would see me. "Let us go," the radio crackled. "I want to finish the round so we can eat." "Copy that," the guard said. He turned. He walked out. The door clicked shut, the lock engaged. I let out a breath that shook my entire body. I scrambled back to the cloning tool. 99%, 100%, complete. I unplugged the tool and shoved it into my pocket. Step 1 was done. I had the data. Now for the hard part, the confession. Miller had said we needed Douglas to break code. We needed him to say the words. I crept back into the hallway. I moved toward the executive offices at the end of the corridor. The door to Douglas's office was ajar. Light spilled out onto the carpet. I could hear voices. "It is done," Marcus was saying. He sounded drunk or exhausted. "The transfers to Cyprus are complete. The accounts are empty. But the audit trail," Douglas said. His voice was clear, arrogant. The Peterson files. They are still messy, Marcus. I crept closer. There was a large decorative planter outside Douglas's door containing a fake ficus tree. I crouched behind it. I pulled out my burner phone and hit record. Burn them? Douglas said. That is destruction of evidence, Marcus whispered. There is no evidence if there is no investigation, Douglas snapped. Marion is discredited. Nobody believes her. We have the Department of Defense contract. The money is safe. We won, Marcus. Stop whining and wipe the damn drives. I felt a surge of triumph so potent it almost made me dizzy. He admitted it. Destruction of evidence. Money laundering. It was the royal flush of federal crimes. And the kickbacks to the senator, Marcus asked. Already processed under consulting fees for Obsidian. Douglas said it is clean. I had it. I had everything. I snatched the phone back. My elbow bumped the ceramic planter. It was not a loud noise, just a dull thud. But in the silence of the night, it sounded like a gunshot. The voices stopped. What was that? Douglas asked. Probably the cleaning crew, Marcus said. I fired the cleaning crew on this floor, Douglas said. Gochenik. Pure, primal panic. I could not run back to the stairwell. They would see me. I needed to hide. I slipped into the room directly across from Douglas's office. It was the boardroom. The same room where I had been fired that morning. I dove under the massive mahogany table. I pulled my knees to my chest. I heard Douglas's footsteps, heavy, angry. He walked into the hallway. Hello, he called out. He stopped right outside the conference room door. I could see the shadow of his shoes under the gap in the door. He pushed the door open. The light from the hallway cut a slice across the carpet. It illuminated the legs of the chairs. It stopped inches from my sneakers. I pressed my hand over my mouth. I became a statue. I became part of the furniture. He stood there for 10 seconds. 10 lifetimes. I could hear him breathing. Nothing, he grunted. He turned around. He walked back to his office. Must have been the building settling, he said. This place is old. Just wipe the drives, Marcus. I am going home. I waited. I waited until I heard the elevator ding. I waited until the silence returned. Then I crawled out from under the table. I stood up in the dark boardroom. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table where Douglas had sat when he fired me. He thought he had wiped the slate clean. He thought he had erased the past. I walked to the window. I looked out at the city lights. I could hear Marcus in the server room down the hall. I could hear him typing. He was wiping the physical drives. He was running the magnetic wand over the disks. He was destroying the evidence. I did not stop him. Let him do it. I already had the clone in my pocket. If he wiped the drives now, it would only prove that they had something to hide. It would prove intent. It would add 5 years to his sentence. I slipped out of the boardroom. I went back to the stairwell. I descended the 40 flights. My legs were trembling, but not from fatigue, from adrenaline. I exited through the loading dock. I walked out into the cool night air. The city was still awake. A taxi was idling at the corner. I climbed into the back seat. Where to, lady? The driver asked. The federal building, I said. And step on it. I touched the pocket of my jacket. The cloning tool was warm against my side. The phone with the recording was in my hand. I looked at the screen. The recording was saved. 4 minutes and 12 seconds of pure guilt. I leaned back against the seat. I closed my eyes. The haste was over. The war was about to end. And Douglas Crane was going to wake up to a very different world on Monday morning. Monday morning arrived with the brightness of a camera flash. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, the kind that usually promises a good day for trading stocks or firing people. Douglas Crane had rented the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton for the New Horizon investor presentation. He had gone all out. There were champagne towers, hired models standing around to look innovative, and giant high-definition screens displaying graphs that went up and to the right. He was looking for $100 million in Series B funding to expand operations. He was selling a vision of the future where consulting was streamlined, digital, and devoid of the messy human element. He thought I was at home, crying into a box of tissues, or maybe calling a lawyer who would tell me I had no case because of the non-disclosure agreements. He did not know I was currently sitting in a black surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, watching a live feed from a button camera on Agent Miller's lapel. You ready? Miller asked. He was sitting next to me, adjusting his earpiece. He was not wearing his flannel shirt today. He was wearing a windbreaker with bold yellow letters on the back. He looked like a predator. I was born ready, I said. I smoothed the lapel of my white suit. White is the color of purity. In some cultures, it is the color of mourning. Today, it was both. Remember, Miller said, let him talk. Let him dig the hole. We move on your signal. What is the signal? I asked. You will know, he said. I opened the van door. I stepped out onto the pavement. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume. I walked to the hotel entrance. The doorman nodded to me. He did not know I was a band person. To him, I was just another wealthy woman coming to hear the pitch. I walked through the lobby. My heels clicked on the marble floor. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a countdown. I entered the ballroom at 10:15 in the morning. The room was packed. There were 300 people there. Bankers, investors, industry titans. The board of directors was sitting in the front row looking smug. They had wiped their hands of me. They thought the problem was solved. Douglas was on stage. He was glowing. He wore a headset microphone and paced back and forth like a tech messiah. And that is why Haven Bridge is not just a consulting firm, he was saying, his voice amplified to fill the cavernous room. We are a vessel for the future. We have cleared out the dead wood. He paused for laughter. A few people chuckled politely. The board members nodded. Dead wood. That was me. That was Marcus. That was anyone who remembered what the word integrity meant. And we are ready to soar, Douglas continued. We are ready to disrupt the stagnation of the old world. I started walking down the center aisle. The room was dim, focused on the stage, but the light from the screens caught my white suit. I was a ghost walking through a graveyard. Heads turned. The whispering started. It rippled through the room like wind through wheat. People recognized me. They nudged their neighbors. Isn't that Marion Sterling? I thought she was fired. I kept walking. I did not look left or right. I kept my eyes on Douglas. He saw me when I was 20 feet from the stage. He froze mid-gesture. His smile faltered, twitched, and then returned tighter this time. He looked like a wax figure beginning to melt. Well, he said into the microphone, it seems we have a crasher. He laughed nervously. The audience did not laugh. They sensed the tension. They sensed the violence in the air. Security, Douglas said, his voice hardening. Please escort Miss Sterling out. She is unwell. I stopped at the base of the stage. I looked up at him. I did not need a microphone. My voice has been trained in boardrooms for 20 years. It carries. I am not crashing, Douglas, I said, and I am not unwell. I am here to correct the record. Ladies and gentlemen, Douglas said, addressing the crowd with a pitying look, this is Marion Sterling, a former employee. She was let go on Friday for severe ethical violations. It is a sad situation. The only violation, I said, raising my voice so it bounced off the back walls, is the $40 million you funneled through Obsidian Solutions. A murmur went through the crowd. It was a low, shocked sound. The name Obsidian Solutions meant nothing to them yet, but the number 40 million got their attention. Douglas's face went red. The veins in his neck bulged. Get her out of here now, he screamed. 2 security guards started toward me. They were big men, hired muscle for the event. The crowd parted to let them through. I did not flinch. I reached into my purse. The guards flinched, stopping in their tracks. They thought I was reaching for a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out the USB drive, the clone of the server. I held it up. It caught the light from the projector. It is all here, Douglas, I said. The shell companies, the fake signatures, the bribes to Senator Hawkins, and the recording from Friday night where you ordered Marcus to wipe the servers. Douglas laughed. It was a shrill, desperate sound. You are delusional, he shouted. You are a thief and a liar! He pointed a shaking finger at me. You are fired, thief! The CEO shouted, accusing me of stealing clients. The FBI walked in. Actually, the agent interrupted, flashing a badge. The side doors burst open with a crash that made half the room jump. Agent Miller walked in. He was not alone. Behind him, a dozen agents in windbreakers swarmed the room. They moved with precise, terrifying speed. Miller walked up the stairs to the stage. He bypassed me completely. He went straight to Douglas. She is not a thief, Miller said, his voice booming without a microphone. She is our whistleblower, and you have the right to remain silent. The CEO's knees hit the floor. It was a surprisingly quiet sound, the thud of expensive Italian wool against the stage floor. Douglas did not faint, but his legs simply gave up on him. He slumped against the podium. The headset microphone slipped, creating a screech of feedback that made the billionaires cover their ears. The room erupted into chaos. Investors were frantically texting their lawyers. The board members, the same ones who had looked at me with such disdain on Friday, were trying to blend into the wallpaper. I saw the chairman trying to sneak out a side exit, only to be blocked by a female agent who looked like she wrestled bears for cardio. "Please remain in the room," she said. "We have warrants for all electronic devices." The look on the chairman's face was worth every second of the last 3 months. He looked like he had just swallowed a lemon. I watched them march Douglas out. He was weeping. Actually weeping. Snot and tears were ruining his $5,000 suit. He looked at me one last time as they dragged him past. There was no hate in his eyes anymore. Just confusion. He could not understand how he had lost. He had the money. He had the power. He had the lack of morals. He did not understand that some variables cannot be put in a spreadsheet. Marcus was arrested in the lobby. I heard later that he had tried to run. He did not get far. He was already spilling his guts to an agent before they even got him in the car. He was trying to cut a deal. He was a follower to the end. I stood at the bottom of the stage. The investors were staring at me now, but it was not with pity. It was with fear and respect. They knew what I had done. I had taken down a titan. Miller walked back to me. He looked tired but happy. "You okay?" he asked. I looked around the ballroom. The champagne was warm. The models looked bored. The graphs on the screens were still pointing up, mocking the disaster that had just occurred. "I am unemployed," I said. "But otherwise I feel fantastic." "You are not unemployed," he said, smiling. "The Department of Justice has a reward program for whistleblowers, 15 to 30% of recovered funds. If the fraud is 40 million, well, you do the math." I did the math. $6 to $12 million. "That is a hell of a severance package," I said. "You earned it," Miller said. "We could not have done it without the recording." "Thank the planter," I said. I walked out of the Ritz-Carlton. The sun was high now. The city was loud. The traffic was a river of yellow cabs and black cars. I took my phone, my real phone, which Miller had returned to me. I turned it on. My notifications were exploding. LinkedIn requests, emails from headhunters, messages from competitors, calls from reporters, breaking news. FBI raids Haven Bridge Consulting. CEO arrested in massive fraud scheme. I swiped the notifications away. I turned the phone off. I did not want to talk to headhunters. I did not want to give a quote to the Wall Street Journal. Not yet. I wanted a drink. I walked down the street. I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of the secret, the weight of the game was gone. I was no longer a cog in the machine. I was the wrench that had broken it. I found a small dive bar on 9th Avenue. It was noon. I did not care. The place smelled of stale beer and lemon polish. It was dark and quiet. I sat in a booth in the back. The leather was cracked. The table was sticky. It was perfect. The bartender walked over. He was an old guy with a towel over his shoulder. "What can I get you?" he asked. I ordered a whiskey neat, the good stuff. I sat there in the silence. I thought about my dad. I thought about his union pin that Douglas had thrown in the trash. I hope he was watching somewhere. I hope he saw that I didn't cross the picket line. I burned the factory down. The bartender brought the drink. I picked up the glass. The amber liquid caught the light from the neon sign in the window. "To the ergonomic chair I will never sit in again," I whispered. I took a sip. The burn was perfect. It tasted like justice. I was not a strategist anymore. I was not a victim. I was the woman who burned the castle to save the kingdom. The bartender wiped the counter nearby. "Rough day?" he asked. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had worn in months. "No," I said. "Best day of my life." The whiskey warmed my chest. Above the bar, a television set from the 90s flickered to life. The volume was low, but the news banner was bright red. Breaking news. Chief Executive Officer of Haven Bridge indicted. I watched the footage. It was shaky, filmed from a helicopter. It showed Douglas Crane being led out of the Ritz-Carlton in handcuffs. He looked smaller than he did in the boardroom. Without his podium, without his power suit perfectly pressed, he was just a man who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. I took another sip. "You know him?" the bartender asked, nodding at the screen. "I used to," I said. "He was my boss." The bartender whistled. "Looks like he is in deep trouble." "What did he do?" "He forgot the basics," I said. He thought he could replace people with algorithms and integrity with buzzwords. I looked at my phone. It was vibrating again. This time I looked at the screen. It was not a reporter. It was Linda from Human Resources. The same woman who had called me scattered. The same woman who had tried to gaslight me into admitting to a crime I did not commit. I let it ring. Then I blocked the number. I imagined the scene back at the office. The Federal Bureau of Investigation would be swarming the open plan floor. They would be seizing the servers, the laptops, even the ergonomic chairs. The junior analysts who had sneered at me in the break room would be answering questions about their billing practices. The frat boys in their slim-fit suits would be realizing that their loyalty to Douglas was not a non-fungible token, but a liability. I felt a twinge of sadness for the innocent ones, the assistants, the cleaning crew. But then I remembered the clean sweep file. Douglas was going to fire them anyway. He was going to gut the company to save his own skin. By burning it down now, I had actually saved the truth, if not the jobs. I finished my drink. I placed a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change," I said. I walked back out into the sunlight. Ninth Avenue was bustling. The city did not stop for scandals. It did not pause for justice. It just kept moving, a relentless tide of concrete and ambition. I stood on the corner and took a deep breath. For 20 years, I had defined myself by my title. Marion Sterling, Senior Client Strategist. Marion Sterling, the fixer. Marion Sterling, the woman who could put lipstick on a pig and sell it as a show pony. That woman was gone. She had died in the server room on the 40th floor. In her place was someone new, someone dangerous, someone who knew that the only way to survive a system rigged against you is to stop playing by the rules and start playing for keeps. I thought about the money. Agent Miller had been serious about the reward, 15 to 30%. Even on the low end, it was enough to retire. I could buy a house in the Hamptons, could buy a vineyard in France. I could disappear. But as I watched the traffic weave through the intersection, I knew I would not disappear. I am not the retiring type. I do not do gardening. I do not do knitting. I fix things. And looking around at the glass towers of Manhattan, at the monuments to ego and greed that pierced the sky, I had a feeling there were a lot more things that needed fixing. There were more Douglas Cranes out there, more hollow men in expensive suits cooking the books and stepping on the little guy. Maybe I would start a new firm. Not a consulting firm, a different kind of service. A service for the people who find the discrepancies, for the people who hear the squeak in the chair and know that something is wrong. I started walking uptown. I did not have a destination. I did not have a schedule. For the first time in 2 decades, my calendar was blank. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. I passed a newsstand. The front page of the afternoon paper was already printed. It showed Douglas's face, twisted in fear, under the headline, "The Crash of Crane." I smiled. I kept walking. My father used to tell me that the hardest part of a fight is not the first punch. It is standing up after you have been knocked down. Douglas Crane had knocked me down. He had taken my office, my reputation, and my peace of mind. But I was the one walking in the sun. The office water cooler has a funny way of teaching lessons. It reminded me today that patience usually outlasts arrogance, and that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting. It is the one taking notes. I blended into the crowd. I was just another face in New York City, but I walked a little taller. My heels clicked a little louder. I was Marion Sterling, and I was just getting started. This is the end of the story, but for me, it is just the beginning. Thanks for listening. This has been a production of Deep Client Audio. Narrated by the author. Copyright 2020, 5 the end.